When Ethan left me alone at the wedding, I knew he had been reborn too. He said, "I can't deceive myself any longer. This time, I don't want to miss out on her again." In my previous life, my sister showed up at my wedding in a bridal gown to steal Ethan, but he refused her. Heartbroken, my sister went abroad to become a war correspondent, and later died on the job. On the same day, Ethan took his life for her, driving his car into a river. The dash cam recorded his final moments, and only then did I realize the repressed yet obsessive love he had for my sister over the years. After being reborn, I watched Ethan and my sister walk away together, and I couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. Ethan doesn't know, my sister has always enjoyed taking what's mine. The more I want it, the more she desires it. But if I don't care for something, it loses its appeal to her. During our wedding ceremony, the officiant asked Ethan, "At this moment, what is the one thing you'd like to say to the bride?" Ethan took the microphone, his voice shaking with emotion as he loudly declared, "Isabella, I love you." The audience gasped, for it was not Isabella. Isabella was my sister. At that very moment, she was carefully walking into the ceremony in a wedding gown, ready to take Ethan away. In my previous life, Ethan had rejected her, saying he only loved me. Isabella, devastated by the rejection, went abroad, became a war correspondent, and ultimately died in the field. Upon hearing the news, Ethan took his own life the same day, driving into the river. The dashcam captured his last words. "I'm so full of regret. Why did I marry Sophia just out of duty? Why didn't I leave with Isabella when I had the chance? Why did I let her go abroad? Now that she's dead, what reason do I have to live? I'm sorry, Isabella, I'm coming to be with you. We will never be apart again." Ethan's voice was filled with despair, regret, and agony. Every word felt like a knife plunging into my heart, over and over again. The most tragic part? At that time, I was already 8 months pregnant. A week after Ethan's death, a seemingly resurrected Isabella brazenly appeared before me. I didn't actually die, I just told Ethan a little lie. I didn't expect him to take it so seriously. Turns out, he really loved me, huh? She stood before me with the posture of a victor, mocking me. She had always enjoyed taking things from me. She was my father's illegitimate daughter, and when her mother abandoned her at the age of 10, my father had no choice but to bring her into the Shin family. After moving in, she put on an innocent act for everyone, but behind the scenes, she couldn't bear to see me have anything better than her. Whether it was our grandparents' affection, our father's love, or even my mother's attention, she wanted it all. It didn't stop there. Clothes, dresses, jewelry, makeup, anything I liked, she had to have too. I always had a feeling she'd try to steal my boyfriend, but I never expected her to succeed. "Ethan, is it true?" Isabella asked, eyes filled with joyful disbelief as tears of happiness welled up. "I need to be brave for us this time," Ethan said resolutely. He stepped down from the altar, leaving me alone on the stage. He gently wiped away Isabella's tears. Turns out, Ethan could be gentle with someone else too. I met Ethan during our first year of college. He came from a poor background, his parents had passed away, and he was raised by his elderly grandmother, who collected recyclables to support his education. I helped him out of kindness, even staying with him during his grandmother's illness, taking her to the hospital and paying for the medical bills. In my previous life, Ethan pursued me actively. He told me I made him feel the warmth and light of the world again. He confessed that while he knew he wasn't in a position to chase me, he feared that one day I would belong to someone else, so he didn't want to risk it. He made a vow, promising to work hard so that I could live a better life. He even swore that if he ever betrayed me, he would cut off his own legs. With my support, Ethan rose to success, and soon after graduating, he became a rising star in his field. He fulfilled his promise, marrying me at the peak of his career. But after the wedding, I could no longer feel the passion he once had for me. Now, looking at Ethan's burning gaze fixed on Isabella, I could see the joy of reuniting with a long-lost love. "What about my sister?" Isabella asked with a feigned dilemma, casting a glance at me. No one noticed the slight hint of triumph in her eyes. I'll never forget the words she whispered to me before she pushed me down the stairs to my death. All I did was pretend to fall in front of Ethan, and then I accidentally let him see the bruises I made myself. He felt so sorry for me. He thought I was being abused at the Shin house. You think he kept his distance from me all these years because he hated me? No, it's because he was afraid he couldn't control his desire to possess me. You have no idea how hard it was for him to resist. I honestly didn't expect him to marry you in the end out of duty. But if I can't have him, then let him die. Neither of us will have him. Now that you know the truth, big sister, why don't you go and die too? After all, only one of us can be the true Shin family heiress. I fell from the tall staircase, resulting in both the death of myself and my unborn child. When I opened my eyes again, I had been reborn, returning to the day of my wedding. Ethan had also been reborn. Ethan turned to look at me, and in his eyes, there was no trace of hesitation or conflict. I can't keep deceiving myself. This time, I don't want to miss out on her again. Without giving me a chance to speak, he grabbed Isabella's hand and left without looking back. Watching Ethan rush off for love, a cold smile crept across my lips. He didn't know, Isabella had always enjoyed taking what was mine. The more I liked something, the more she wanted it. And if I didn't want it, she lost interest too. That grand wedding, of course, ended in nothingness. The fact that Ethan abandoned me at the altar became a joke that everyone laughed at. The one being mocked was me. No one blamed Isabella, the homewrecker. I knew it was because Ethan had pulled some strings in the social circles. He was now a rising star in his industry, and no one dared to offend him. I didn't bother to clear my name either. After all, Ethan's reckoning was yet to come. I was more focused on rebuilding my career. After getting together with Ethan, my entire focus had been on him. I managed his company, dealt with his social engagements, and after his career stabilized, I willingly retreated to take care of the household. I thought he was worth it. Turns out, I was utterly blind. A month after Ethan and Isabella disappeared, they returned to the Shin family. She knelt on the ground, crying her heart out, as if she were the victim after stealing someone else's husband. When I got home, I saw my parents with helpless expressions on their faces. Despite everything, they couldn't ignore the outrageous scene Isabella had caused at my wedding. They were, of course, furious. However, her tearful apology seemed to have slightly softened their anger. The moment Isabella saw me, she broke down even more, crawling toward me on her knees. Big sister, you can punish me however you want, but please don't blame Ethan. It's all my fault. Anything? I asked, confirming. Anything, Isabella said firmly. In my previous life, I had been lenient with Isabella. Not just because she always put on a facade, but I even believed that her desire for everything I liked came from her own lack of confidence, wanting to imitate me in every way. Of course, the most important reason was that I never deemed her worthy of my concern. The confidence my family gave me since childhood made me never think Isabella could surpass me. I underestimated her. So, at that moment, I bent down and slapped Isabella hard across the face. The loud smack left Isabella completely stunned. Before she could react, Ethan forcefully shoved me away, nearly making me fall. He held Isabella protectively in his arms. Sophia, whatever issues we have are between us, not Isabella. If you're angry, take it out on me. Fine. I didn't hesitate and slapped Ethan hard across the face as well. When dealing with scum like them, I wasn't going to be soft. Ethan, clearly enraged, didn't expect me, always gentle and soft-spoken, to be this rough. My parents were just as shocked. For the past month, after being abandoned at the altar, I hadn't shown any signs of emotional breakdown. Instead, I'd been actively working on improving myself. They knew I never held grudges against my sister, so they assumed I was turning my pain into motivation and that I'd moved on. Moved on? Not a chance. There's justice in the world. The timing just hasn't come yet. Sophia, we've come back this time to sincerely apologize to you, Ethan said, trying to sound righteous. as if I should be grateful he was admitting his wrongs. I couldn't help but laugh at his shamelessness. So, just because you apologize, I'm supposed to accept it? I asked Ethan. If I killed your entire family and then said sorry, would everything be fine? So why do we need police, laws, morals, or any sense of right and wrong? Ethan was left speechless by my sarcasm. He hadn't expected me to be so unyielding, completely disregarding his feelings. In the past, I'd always carefully maintained his dignity. I knew how insecure he was about his background, so both in private and in public, I made sure to preserve his male pride. He'd grown accustomed to it, and my uncharacteristic behavior caught him off guard, leaving him standing there speechless. It was then that Isabella spoke. Sis, I know you love Ethan deeply, so it's hard for you to accept us being together right now. But love can't be one-sided. We are genuinely in love. Please, let us be. And if I refuse, will you two break up? I asked Isabella with a smile. You've never been so unreasonable before. Ethan doesn't love you. If you stay together, you'll never be happy. You should actually feel lucky that you didn't marry him. You've been spared from a tragedy, Isabella said with righteous conviction. I had to admit, Isabella wasn't wrong. Marrying Ethan had indeed been my tragedy. But did that give her the right to steal someone else's husband? I sneered sarcastically. This is the first time I've ever heard someone make being a mistress sound so noble and pure. Isabella blushed at my remark. Before she could respond, I continued questioning, should I be thanking you? Thanking you for publicly humiliating me by stealing Ethan on our wedding day? Thanking you for interfering in our relationship? Thanking you for making me realize how much of a scumbag Ethan is and how unworthy he is of my trust? Thanking you for being the mistress? She's not a mistress. Ethan quickly jumped to her defense. I know it's hard for you to accept our breakup right now, but I don't love you, and nothing you say will change my decision to be with Isabella. Ethan, do you think I'm that pathetic? I stared at him as if he were an idiot. What makes you think I still have any feelings for a man who's irresponsible, unfaithful, clueless, and tainted? Do I look like a trash bin to you? Sophia, what's happened to you? Do you even realize how ugly you are acting right now? Ethan was visibly shaken by my blunt words, his anger flaring up. The more you act like this, the less I could ever love you. Well, I guess I should be grateful for your lack of affection, then. I sneered. You. Ethan was at a loss for words. His face flushed with frustration, as he probably never imagined I would become so sharp-tongued. Isabella tried to soothe him. Don't be mad, Ethan. Sister is just saying these things because she's upset. I'm sure she'll forgive us eventually. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to calm himself down. He said, Sophia, no matter what, I'm really thankful for the support you gave me back then. To repay you, I genuinely wanted to be with you and take care of you for the rest of my life. The more he spoke, the more ridiculous it sounded. So his reasoning was that he had no choice but to be with me because I helped him? Because I gave him financial support, he felt morally obligated to repay me with his life? He was acting like he had been blackmailed by his own conscience. Sophia, I tried, but being with you just didn't make me happy. I don't want our marriage to become a burden for both of us. You deserve someone better, and I can finally be with my true love. As he said this, Ethan cast a loving glance at Isabella, and they shared a sickeningly sweet smile. It was revolting. Even my parents couldn't take it anymore. Ethan, Isabella, you came here today to make amends for the hurt you caused Sophia, my father said pointedly. In other words, not to flaunt your relationship. Ethan pulled out a card. Here's a bank card. I did the math, and the amount you supported me with, including the hospital bills for my grandma, totaled around $30,000. There's $300,000 in this card, 100-fold repayment, so you won't be at a loss. I looked at the card coldly. Fortunately, I had no expectations of Ethan, so I didn't feel disappointed. $300,000 was indeed a lot, but did he forget that he got his job, built his company, and established his career thanks to me? Forget $300,000, his current worth of $3 million was my doing too. Sophia, Ethan has been more than generous with you. Isabella added fuel to the fire. Most people would have just paid back what they borrowed, maybe with some interest. 10,000 at most. Since graduating college, you haven't worked a day or earned a penny. You've been living off Ethan all these years. Shouldn't you be grateful? Is that what you've been telling her about me? I asked Ethan. His eyes flickered, avoiding the question, which clearly confirmed it. Sophia, I just hope we can part on good terms. We'll still be family. Part on good terms? After Ethan graduated and started his business, I stood by his side every step of the way. I drank myself into a stomach ulcer just to help him secure deals, even tolerated inappropriate advances from some unsavory men in the business world. Ethan knew all this and once felt deeply guilty about it. But now, Isabella could dismiss everything with a casual remark, "You never earned a penny." I took the card from his hand. I noticed the disdainful smile on Isabella's face, and Ethan let out a relieved breath. Even though my family wasn't poor, 300,000 was still a significant sum of money. They were convinced I wouldn't refuse. I didn't disappoint them. I wish you both eternal happiness. Thank you for your blessing, sister. Isabella said the words, but there was no joy in her tone. Just like every other time she'd taken something from me, she expected everything to work out in her favor. But then, I casually added, a whore and a dog, a perfect match. Their faces turned green with rage. Isabella finally lost her composure and indignantly exclaimed, "Sister, you took the money, and now you're still acting like this? Don't you think you're being hypocritical?" "First of all," I said, enunciating each word clearly, "this money is what I'm rightfully owed. Ethan's success today is thanks to me, and no matter how much money he gives me, I deserve it. Second, you two cheated, staining my life with a huge scandal. I'm entitled to compensation. And lastly, I wasted 10 years of my life on a dog. Is 300,000 really that much?" Isabella was speechless. Ethan hadn't expected to be humiliated like this. He stiffened and said, "Regardless, I don't want to argue about who's right or wrong anymore. When have you ever been right?" I cut him off coldly. "Fine, let's just say it's my fault." Ethan couldn't argue with me anymore and had no choice but to agree. But things have already come to this point. I've done everything I could. If you can't forgive me, there's nothing I can do. The only thing I ask is that you don't hate Isabella. If you must hate someone, hate me. Don't worry, I won't punish myself for your mistakes. Hating you two would just be a waste of my time. I didn't want to waste any more energy on them. Ethan would face his karma soon enough. As for Isabella, her fate wouldn't be any better after being with Ethan. Did she really think Ethan was some kind of good guy? Without another word, I headed back to my room. For me, what mattered most now was my career. I wasn't going to be foolish enough to build someone else's future anymore. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my work. Using the $3 million Ethan gave me, I started a digital media company, signing multiple influencers and live stream hosts. I also invested heavily in short video content and online novels. The company grew quickly. I was so busy that I only had 5 or 6 hours of sleep each night. Meals were rushed, and I had no time to even think about Ethan or Isabella anymore. Then one day, I received a call from a former partner of Ethan's. They couldn't get in touch with him and wanted to know if I was still interested in renewing the contract. The project had been one I helped Ethan secure, so they naturally turned to me. "We won't be renewing," I said, "but I'm open to collaborating with Henry instead." I explained to Henry the situation with Ethan and me. He quickly agreed, saying that his collaboration with Ethan had been mainly out of respect for me. Plus, he mentioned that Ethan had been slacking off lately, making himself hard to reach, and that other business partners were beginning to lose patience with him. Hearing this, I didn't feel the need to hold back anymore. In the past, I hadn't gone after Ethan's clients, not out of kindness, but because it required resources. After my rebirth, I had a clear sense of which markets were more promising, so it wasn't worth the effort. But now, business was practically falling into my lap, and there was no reason to turn it away. I started reaching out to Ethan's former partners one by one. Most of them decided to stop working with him once their contracts expired and switched to me instead. Strangely, Ethan didn't seem to notice what was happening. Back in the day, this would have been unthinkable. Ethan used to be a workaholic. Although his negotiation skills were lacking, he was always responsible when it came to his clients and wouldn't have let them be poached without a fight. But I wasn't surprised. During my rare moments of downtime, I'd scroll through social media for a bit of relaxation. There, I'd see Isabella and Ethan constantly traveling together, posting about their adventures from all around the world. Isabella would share multiple updates each day, and Ethan would like and comment on every one of them. They were using social media to flaunt their love, turning it into their personal playground for public displays of affection. Time flew by, and before I knew it, 6 months had passed. This year, during the Chinese New Year, Ethan and Isabella returned from their trip abroad, bringing back loads of gifts for my parents. Isabella even brought me a present. "Sis, I got this pink crystal bracelet for you," she said. "It's been blessed to bring good fortune and love. I've heard from Mom and Dad that you've been single these past 6 months, and both Ethan and I are really worried about you. Don't worry." I handed the bracelet back to Isabella. I just refuse to settle for less. "The cost of dealing with dogs is too high." Ethan's face darkened. "I won't be staying for dinner," I announced, turning to head upstairs. "I have things to take care of." I couldn't stomach the sight of him any longer. Just as I walked into my room, I got a call from Mason. Mason was a high school classmate who had recently returned to the country. We had reconnected at a reunion and had kept in touch due to some business projects. "Are you free tonight?" he asked. "Why aren't you having dinner with your family?" "It's New Year's," I joked. "Too many relatives," Mason laughed. "I can't stand the constant questions about marriage. If you're free tonight, how about we grab a bite to eat?" "Sure," I agreed. I had no other plans anyway. Mason said he'd be at my place in 10 minutes to pick me up. I quickly changed clothes and applied some light makeup. It had been a while since I last put on makeup, so I decided to dress up a bit for the occasion. When I stepped into the living room, I saw Ethan and Isabella cozied up together, looking annoyingly sweet. "Sis, you're all dressed up. Are you meeting your boyfriend?" Isabella asked, deliberately putting me on the spot. Ethan glanced at me too. "Who I meet is none of your business," I said. "We're just concerned about you," Isabella pouted, making a show of it in front of my parents. "Mom, Dad, it's been so long, but sis still acts like this. I've tried so hard to be careful around her." My mom wasn't having it. Back when Isabella first returned to the Shin family, my parents had felt sorry for her, believing that she shouldn't be punished for the mistakes of the previous generation. She was sweet and knew how to play the victim, so they didn't hold anything against her. But after she stole Ethan, my mom saw her for who she truly was. She said bluntly, "Careful? And yet you're constantly clinging to Ethan in front of Sophia? You call that being careful? Every day, you post dozens of updates on social media to show off how in love you are with him." Isabella's face turned red from my mom's remarks. After stammering for a while, she finally said, "I thought you had already moved on, so I'll be more mindful next time." "No need to be mindful. You post whatever you want," I replied indifferently. "I'll just take it as entertainment." "What do you mean by that?" Isabella asked, clearly displeased. "Exactly what it sounds like. The higher you jump, the harder you fall." I didn't waste any more words on her and headed out. Mason was already waiting downstairs. Seeing me, he immediately got out of the car and opened the door for me like a true gentleman. As I got into the car, I had this fleeting feeling that a pair of eyes was watching me from above. A cold smile tugged at the corner of my lips. Looks like the real show is about to start. After dinner with Mason, I came home around 10 p.m., holding a bouquet of flowers. Normally, by this time Ethan and Isabella would have left, but tonight they were still here. As soon as Isabella saw the bouquet of champagne roses in my hand, her expression visibly changed. That look of excitement in her eyes was unmistakable, just like every time she wanted something of mine. "You're done with your date so early, sis?" Isabella asked. I ignored her and carefully arranged the roses, one by one, into a vase. "I saw you leave with a man earlier, tall guy. Is he your boyfriend?" Isabella continued probing. "What? You like him too?" I responded with a cold smile. "Do you really love my leftovers that much?" Isabella quickly replied, "I'm just concerned for you. After all, Ethan and I are together now, and we're getting married soon." "Well, congratulations to you both." After finishing with the flowers, I headed back to my room. I had just changed into my pajamas when I heard a knock on the door. Opening it, I found Ethan standing there. "Do you really have a boyfriend now?" he asked. "What does that have to do with you?" "I'm just worried you might get hurt," Ethan said. "That guy's name is Mason, right? I've heard from some friends that you've been spending a lot of time with him recently." It wasn't surprising that we had mutual friends. After all, Ethan and I had been together for years. "Yep," I admitted without hesitation. "We even had a candlelit dinner tonight." "Did you know he has a girlfriend overseas?" Ethan asked, visibly upset. "So?" I said. "He has a girlfriend. He's already taken, and he's still spending time with you." "What does that make you?" Ethan's anger flared when he saw my indifferent expression. Before I could respond, he continued, "Sophia, what's wrong with you? Ever since we broke up, you've been acting like you don't care. Are you purposely trying to make me feel guilty?" I chuckled. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. "What's so funny?" Ethan asked, still fuming. "I'm laughing at how shameless you are." "Stop pretending, Sophia. I know you haven't gotten over me. If you had, why haven't you dated anyone since we broke up? Why would you start seeing a guy with a girlfriend? You're only doing this to get back at me. So, you agree that being with someone who already has a partner is shameful?" I didn't want to argue with him anymore. It was pointless. A man like Ethan would never doubt his own charm or believe he was inferior to anyone. "That's absolutely shameful," Ethan declared with conviction. "And what about Isabella?" I asked, smiling. Ethan froze, clearly not expecting me to turn the tables on him. "That's different." "How is it different?" I asked, genuinely amused. "Wasn't it the same when we were still together, and you and Isabella started sneaking around? But when it's you, it's some grand pursuit of true love, and when it's we, it's something shameful. What, does cheating have to happen at a wedding for it to count as romantic? You?" Ethan's face flushed with embarrassment as he gritted his teeth. "Sophia, I'm only saying this because I care about you. I know Mason is just playing around. He's heading back abroad after the holidays, and you really think there's a future for you too. How do you know he won't stay for me? Maybe he'll even dump his girlfriend for me. If Isabella could do it, why can't I?" I purposely provoked him, knowing full well Isabella had been eavesdropping outside. I acted as if I hadn't noticed. Since Ethan was facing away from the door, he didn't notice either. "You're just trying to prove that you're more attractive than Isabella, aren't you? You're still hung up on the fact that she stole me," Ethan said with unwavering confidence. I didn't respond, simply stared at him in silence. Ethan frowned. "Why are you looking at me like that? Is there something on my face?" "There is," I nodded. "What's on my face?" Ethan immediately began to fumble across his face. A bit of disgust, I replied. "Sophia." Ethan was furious. "Since you have no shame, I won't bother protecting your fragile ego either," I said, my words cutting deep. "Mason comes from a prestigious family. His father is a business tycoon, his mother a university professor, and everyone around him is either rich or influential. He's on a completely different level than someone like you from a small-town academic family. He's a graduate of an international top university, tall, handsome, with a charming and elegant manner. Most importantly, he doesn't carry the insecurity or arrogance that defines you. His relaxed approach to life is something you'll never come close to achieving. How do you still think I'd be hung up on you with someone like him around? Am I insane or did I get hit on the head?" I watched as Ethan's face turned green from my words. Don't show up in front of me again, I said slowly, it's just too much for the eyes. Sophia, you better remember what you said today. Don't regret this later, Ethan spat, storming out. As he reached the door, he briefly glanced at Isabella but didn't stop for a second. Isabella gave me a look like she wanted to say something, but she bit her lip and chased after Ethan instead. After that, though, Isabella started coming home more often. She no longer followed Ethan around on trips but instead casually tried to get information about me from my parents. And once she found out that Mason and I were getting closer, her visits became even more frequent. On my birthday, I called my mom, purposely telling her I'd be having dinner with Mason that evening and wouldn't be coming home. I also happened to mention the location and time. Sure enough, at 6:30 p.m. in the restaurant, I accidentally ran into Ethan and Isabella. They were arm in arm. And so were Mason and I. I noticed Ethan's gaze fixated on the space beside me where Mason stood. Isabella's gaze, though, was all on Mason, her eyes scanning him with a glimmer of excitement. Well, sis, what a coincidence. Let's dine together? Isabella greeted us enthusiastically. Not convenient. I rejected her outright and pulled Mason towards our reserved table. Throughout dinner, I could feel Ethan and Isabella's eyes on us, but I ignored them. Halfway through the meal, Mason surprised me. He went over to the piano at the elegant restaurant and started playing a beautiful piece for my birthday, drawing the attention of everyone there. He also gave me flowers and an expensive piece of jewelry, making several women envious, including Isabella. I watched the predatory gleam in Isabella's eyes, barely able to contain her desire. So, when Mason got up to go to the restroom, Isabella followed him. The moment Isabella left, Ethan came straight towards me. Sophia, are you serious? Are you really planning to be Mason's mistress? Ethan sneered. Don't be so crass, I replied calmly. Mason and I are in love. You've changed. You're not the Sophia I used to know. Does it matter if I'm the Sophia you once knew? I asked indifferently. To me, you're irrelevant. Why should I care what you think of me? Sophia, I already told you, don't show up in front of me. You're an eyesore. With that, I stood up and walked towards the restroom. Ethan followed right behind. We both arrived at the hallway leading to the restroom just in time to see Isabella leaning into Mason's arms. Thanks, Mason. If it weren't for you, I would have fallen, Isabella said, pretending to be flustered, but it was clear to anyone that she was deliberately pressing herself into him. I saw Ethan's face turn black with anger. Maybe this scene was all too familiar? After all, this was how Isabella had seduced Ethan back then. Mason gently set her back on her feet. Isabella, however, pretended to twist her ankle again and threw herself back into Mason's arms, clinging tightly to him while letting out a soft, flirtatious moan. Ah, it hurt so much. What's wrong? Mason asked, concerned. I think I twisted my ankle. I can't walk, Isabella said pitifully. Do you want me to take a look? Mason offered. Wouldn't that be too much trouble? Besides, if my sister saw, she might misunderstand you, Isabella replied, but her body pressed even closer to Mason. Are you really afraid of being misunderstood? Mason whispered into her ear suggestively. Aren't you just trying to seduce me? I'm not. She protested, but her actions contradicted her words as she leaned even closer. Mason took the opportunity to hold her tightly and teased. Didn't I hear you're about to get married? Still acting this way? Who said I'm getting married? How could I possibly marry Ethan? Isabella scoffed as she buried herself deeper into Mason's arms. I don't even like him. He's just a small-town nobody, nowhere near good enough for me. I just haven't broken up with him yet because I didn't want to hurt his feelings. Really? But I heard you stole Ethan from your sister at her own wedding ceremony, Mason teased her. Moved on so quickly? Or is it that you just enjoy going after your sister's men? What, your sister doesn't want him anymore, so now neither do you. Not at all, Isabella denied. I just genuinely like you. Be honest with me, do you only like men who belong to your sister? Mason tilted Isabella's chin up. After all, I'm just having fun with your sister, but I do appreciate honest women. It seemed like Isabella was desperate to steal Mason away from me, so she admitted, yes, ever since we were kids, I've always enjoyed taking what belonged to her. Why should she get to enjoy everything the Shin family offered her while I had nothing? It's unfair. So I vowed that whatever was hers, I would take, including her men. Isabella. So you're with me just because I'm your sister's boyfriend and not because you actually like me? Ethan, unable to watch any longer, exploded in anger. Isabella was startled. She hadn't expected me and Ethan to be there. Flustered, she tried to explain, no, it's not what you think. I was just helping my sister test Mason, to see if he's really sincere with her. That's not true, Mason exposed her. You were practically throwing yourself into my arms just now, rubbing up against me like you couldn't wait to strip right there. I wasn't. Isabella cried in denial. Mason didn't bother saying more. He left Isabella and walked over to me. So, how's the mission going, old friend? I smiled and nodded. I'll apologize to your girlfriend later for having her boyfriend sullied like this. No need. She absolutely despises green TB asterisk cheese and fully supports me helping you out. I'll take her out for dinner abroad someday. Deal? Mason and I walked out together. Behind us, we could hear Ethan's enraged voice echoing, Isabella, I'll kill you. Do you know how much I sacrificed for you? How could you do this to me? Isabella screamed in return, let go of me, you lunatic. You brought this on yourself, falling for my tricks. It's not my fault you're stupid. Now that everything's out in the open, I'm done with you. Let's break up. I can't stand to even look at what Sophia discarded. I didn't bother turning around to watch the drama unfold. It was just two dogs fighting. What's there to see? But I couldn't deny the satisfaction I felt, the sweet taste of revenge. Later, I heard that their fight escalated to the point they ended up at the police station. Both were injured, and the scene was far from glamorous. After that, I heard Ethan's company ran into major issues. He was drowning in debt and on the brink of bankruptcy, but none of that mattered to me. Ethan was just an outsider now. As for Isabella, after repeatedly trying to seduce my boyfriends, my parents finally lost patience with her and cut ties, kicking her out of the family. I thought that would be the end of any involvement with those two, but I was wrong. Ethan still had the nerve to seek me out. He waited for me outside my office after work. It had only been a few months, but Ethan looked much thinner and completely defeated. Of course, I knew his situation. If he couldn't secure another loan, his company would collapse. He said, Sophia, I was wrong. I never imagined Isabella would turn out to be like that. I stared at him coldly, a mocking smile playing on my lips. I was enjoying the show. He continued, sounding more and more pitiful, I was tricked by Isabella. I regret everything so much. I now realize that you're the one I truly love. Can we get back together? I swear, if I ever betray you again, I'll break my own legs. I couldn't help but laugh at his desperation. Didn't you say the same thing before? How are your legs still intact? Are you a centipede or a crab with that many legs? Ethan was utterly embarrassed by my words. Stop acting. I'm not going to help you by co-signing a loan at the bank. I laid it out clearly. Spending even a second more with him was a waste of my time. I'm not asking for your help with a loan. I really do love you. In fact, I was jealous when you were with Mason, but I was too afraid to admit it back then, thinking you'd laugh at me. And now you're not afraid anymore? I'm more scared of losing you than being laughed at. Ugh. I pretended to gag in disgust. You're revolting. Ethan's face turned deathly pale, his eyes reddening. Sophia, will you really never forgive me? When you and Mason staged everything to expose Isabella, wasn't it to show me her true colors so that we could get back together? I couldn't help but laugh again. Let me tell you something, Ethan, I said bluntly. You're not the only one who's been reborn. Ethan's face twisted in shock. In our past life, when you committed suicide for Isabella, did you ever think about me, carrying your child? What makes you think I could ever forgive you, let alone love you again? Everything I've done is just for revenge, I said coldly. For myself, and for the child that never got to be born. Sophia, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Ethan panicked, desperately trying to grab me. I dodged him. He kept mumbling, it was my fault, I was so wrong. How could I have abandoned you and our child for a woman like that? Sophia, I was irritated by his words, so I called for security. Escort him out. Don't ever let him step foot here again. Sophia. Ethan was restrained by the guards, but his eyes remained fixed on me, filled with regret and sorrow. To me, it was utterly ridiculous. If he had known it would come to this, why make those choices in the first place? I left coldly and never let Ethan see me again. He called, I blocked him. Any unknown number, I refused to answer. He waited for me outside the office and at my apartment, but I had the security guards chase him away. I even filed a police report, making sure Ethan had no way to find me. When I had almost forgotten about these people, Isabella showed up. Shamelessly, she demanded money, threatening to expose how our family had kicked her out if I didn't pay. She claimed she'd ruin me and the Shin family's reputation. I calmly sent her a video of her trying to seduce Mason. I'd anticipated she would resort to something like this when she hit rock bottom. Isabella went mad. One day, as I was driving home from work, she recklessly sped her car toward me, trying to crash into me. Just then, another car came out of nowhere and slammed into hers, sending Isabella's car flying. Both cars were wrecked in front of me. My heart pounded as I stepped out of my own car, shaken. Isabella's car was completely crushed at the front, and she was pinned inside, a bloody, unrecognizable mess, motionless. The other car wasn't much better. Inside, Ethan was covered in blood, but his eyes were still open, as if he was using every ounce of strength to see me. I watched his lips move slightly, as though he was trying to say, I'm sorry. But it was meaningless. I shook my head, refusing to accept his apology. Even if Ethan died, it would be a redemption for the child we lost. I would never forgive him for everything he did. Soon, the police arrived at the scene. Isabella was pronounced dead on the spot. Ethan survived after being rescued but was left in a vegetative state, forever confined to a hospital bed. I never visited him, because, in my world, Ethan no longer existed. My life had already started anew long ago.